I don't know. I think that's part of her lifespan too. Is she presented a much harder puzzle to solve in long tournaments than some of these other decks did at times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that like I said, I think that's a healthy life cycle. I think Prism represents a pretty healthy life cycle for a hero. All right, everybody. Well, welcome back. If you haven't noticed yet, Jason's not joining us this week. He's got some adulting going on in his life. I think Mason had a game tonight, so lots going on there. So he will not be with us, but Blake and I are going to hold it down. So just to lay it out there for everybody, because, the big news, I think that we can both agree, the big news is Prism hitting Living Legend, what it's going to do for the format currently. But I think one of these things that like people tend to throw out there as like, don't worry about it, it's fine, is this Living Legend format, this sort of amalgamous thing that gets brought up. And I'm curious what other people's views are on that. Like, if Living Legend was a format, like, are people interested in actually playing that? Do people want to do like the whatever the Magic format is? I can't even think of it off the top of my head.
Legacy,
thank you. Legacy, like a Legacy or Pioneer. I don't know what Pioneer really is, to be totally honest. But like, are people actually interested in playing with a bunch of Living Legend heroes? I mean, I think it sounds cool, right, if it's executed, but curious what everyone else's thoughts are. We're going to hit that more next week, but leave comments with your thoughts, with how you stand on that, because I'm not going to get into it personally. We'll talk about that next week, but curious to see what other people think about that. But then, we've got a lot to talk about this week, right? Like, we've got Prism hitting LL, sort of talking a little bit about lifespans of heroes so far.
Yeah.
And then the banned and restricted list, what was / not touched. And then just the general meta kind of right now, and like what we thought coming out of Lil, and how we feel about it. So thank you for joining us. Hope you guys enjoy this podcast. So, Blake, where do you want to start? What do we got here?
I think we have to start with, I guess, the combination of, number one, we had another Runeblade win a Pro Tour, so that's interesting. And alongside that, a recurring theme. Turns out Runeblades are good, and they'll most likely be the first class to get the old 2 in LL status here not too long, right? Because we're not far off with national season coming.
Well, it helps when
it's almost a giveaway.
Because James White's stated that he's most proud of like the wizard class and what that looks like in Fab, because that was such a wild card, right? Like, he talks about, it's an old interview at this point, but talking about how, like, that design space was so foreign to what they had been building, like the typical math they'd used to build balance. So like where Wizard ended up, I think James has made it pretty clear that he's super proud of that. But then he got Jason Chung saying that Runeblade is his favorite class. Yeah. Is that a coincidence that we see like all of these like constantly super strong, fun Runeblades, or what? So that was funny to me to kind of look back on.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too, because with Runeblades, a lot of their value comes from not attack. Like that interaction is where all three of them basically get the most strength. And in the history of the game, I think some of our best generic cards just help them facilitate their game plan. And I guess in my mind, that's part of why Runeblade is very strong, right? Because if you think about it, what is the best non-attack action the game has ever seen? Plunder Run, obviously. Yep. And who cares about there are so many classes who would never even put that card in their deck. For Runeblades, not only is it good because they want to play multiple attacks a turn typically, but it also happens to be a non-attack with huge upside, something that they care about. And then you have Belittle and Minnowism, which is again probably some of the best non-attack combination of generic common cards that the game has ever seen. And so happens that Chain and Viscerai and Briar all like that combination. And then when they printed Rosetta Thorn, it made cards like, Belittle Minnowism even better because it's, basically one card that facilitates your sword.
I mean, how many sets do we think it's going to be before we see a non-attack that tutors an attack? I mean, like, why not at this point, right? Like, just fucking send them to the moon. Let's go. So that's. I think that doesn't hurt to have one of the designers, the lead designer, like be like, this is my favorite class. So.
In regards to the Lil Win, because I think we obviously have to talk about it. With it being Briar, we've now seen Briar win a lot of big things. She kind of is in a weird spot in terms of people, how you feel about her. Because I think if you asked about Briar when she first came out, she's very much followed the Chain villain arc, right? Yeah, she was the big bad, and then she kind of fell off, and now she's back, and you're like, I don't like her, but she's fine. Like the way that they've kind of balanced her, they put it in a good space. But it's interesting because she has won a lot, and I find that on top of the Rune Blades being controversial, it's interesting that Matt Folks won because he's been pretty controversial in terms of his TCG career, and some of his Magic stuff has followed him over, which I think is unfortunate in some ways because talking to some of the guys like Hamish and the Push the Point guys, they've talked to him, interacted with him, and they've said, he's a good guy, he's just misunderstood. And I'm curious what other people think, and I'm curious your thoughts. He seems like a guy who is almost embracing the villain role because that's what people have pushed on him.
I see, that's what I thought at first, right? So I don't think, if you've been listening to us for a while, after that God, what was
initial nationals? Yeah, he won nationals.
But I'm trying to think of. I was trying to think of where it was, where it was. I was getting too specific with it, but after that initial win, right, when he was, he was sharking. He was like that. I get almost like we spoke out pretty hard against that, right? Like even our thumbnail was kind of like a shot at his picture that he took, but I gotta say, like if I'm just looking at it. I mean, it strikes me as almost just like a dude's. It's just a guy that's like growing up, if I'm being totally honest, looking back at my college years and like my mid 20s, I was like not like the most well-rounded, squared away dude, right? So I think the fact that he owned it and he said, because if you guys watched his deck tech. If anyone listening watches deck tech, if you haven't, check it out. It's cool. But like in that, he totally owned the fact that he knew he was unsportsmanlike in that whole tournament. And that's been something he's been working on. Because I think maybe he leaned into it because he's like, oh, well, this is my lot now after that experience. He's like, I'm the villain. I'm going to lean into this. And he got a lot of hate. But I think that, enough times passed for him to be like, okay, but like, I don't want to be that guy. So like, I'm working on it. Like I'm growing up, adjusting myself, which I think speaks volumes. I think that that's way more important than, and I might be totally wrong here. My therapist, no, not, I actually don't have a therapist, but I maybe should. I did. No, sorry. That's a whole tangent. So I'm going totally off the rails here. Where's Jason just to say some stupid shit and let us keep moving? No, I think that it's really important to like acknowledge that those pieces of yourself, and be able to move past them, which it seems. And I could be totally wrong. And he could just be playing a game and know that like, dude, I'm going to keep fucking sharking people. I just couldn't right now because then I would get lambasted. I don't know. I like to think that I need to be more optimistic though, because I was up until about 2 years ago, I was like the most cynical, pessimistic person that I think anyone would have met. So yeah, I'm trying to see like the light.
I think the unfortunate thing in his scenario that kind of bums me out is that a lot of people take pride in Fab being this special, unique community, but then ironically, many of the people who knew of him or knew him in Magic have now decided that, hey, you know what? No, he hasn't changed at all. He couldn't possibly change. He's the same guy we knew. He did this thing in Magic. And that's the thing that I think is ironic is I don't know how long ago it was, obviously, but it is funny that the people in Magic, when I ask former Magic players, so what's the deal with Folks? What don't you like about him, or what was his deal? The argument is always two things. One, he was sharky when he played. He kind of like skirted that line of gamesmanship and sportsmanship. And the other thing is always the promo thing where he like got another pro. I don't even know the full story of it, right? But it's like there's two things. That's it. That's all you can bring up. And you don't bring up instances where he outright cheated. It's where he kind of played the fringe of the rules, which again is just, there are plenty of people like that have done that, but they choose one specific person to kind of target. And I don't know, I would hope that the Fab community would be a little bit better in that sense, because people want to take so much pride in the Fab community being better than other communities.
Yeah.
And then immediately now it's like, oh, well, but there's this one guy who he's an exception. We don't like him from our old days. It's like, well, I didn't know him. I just saw his sharky thing at UK Nationals and I thought it was kind of a dick move. But then again, he owned up to it. That's a move. That's a point. And to some degree, I wonder if he owned it because the community didn't immediately, blacklist him. They could have easily, kudos to the UK community for trying to best out of him and saying like, hey man, just so you know, this is why you're catching some heat. People just don't like how you behaved. Rather than just being like, no, dude's dead to us. He needs to get pushed out. Let's push him out. They took him and tried to, fix the problem, as opposed to they did what we take pride in.
I think, I was just going to say, I think that what Blake's trying to say here is thank you, because without people like you existing, we would know better than to let our personalities run rampant. Because I think that we went pretty hard. And I think that we're pretty comfortable going pretty hard at things, because we know like there's enough people out there that are going to have more sensible, outspoken personalities. We can kind of lean into that a little more worry-free, It's like,
yeah, I think some of it too is also, to be fair, like we tend to go hard because that's our personality type. But in a lot of ways, a lot of the things we do, it is hyperbole. Like we don't genuinely think the dude is an absolute pile of human garbage. It was just funny. Oh, see, I don't actually have a huge issue with people being sharky, because like it's a game. Like if you want to do it,
there's a piece of me
should do it back.
Well, But the thing is I think that my stance on it was much more. I think I was much more with the community, in the sense that, having a little bit of like that superiority complex, like we've got something really sweet going here. Let's be like really wary of incorporating like this other shit. And like, we haven't seen much of it, but like, as soon as we do, like, let's be hyper aware of it. So that's definitely where I was coming from. But
I guess I always look at sharky stuff like that. Like I grew up playing a lot of pickup basketball, and I like one of the general rules in pickup basketball is, you start with the baseline being no blood, no foul. Unless someone absolutely like busts my lip open, I'm probably not going to call a foul on some weak little touch foul. But as soon as I feel like someone's being soft and they're starting to do that kind of stuff, like they're calling fouls when I just barely touch them. Okay, cool. Now I know who, if they touch me, I'm going to give it back to them. I'm going to treat them the way they treat me. And I guess to some degree, like if you got somebody like that, number one, watch them. And number two, just do it back to them. Like if treat them how they treat you, that's fine. Like you're not being mean. You're not aggressively telling them that they can leave and you think they're terrible. You're basically just saying, look, if you want to be sharky, I can play those rules too. That's fine. I'll do it with you. But I don't know. Overall, I thought he did handle himself well. I thought he has handled himself well in the wake of winning the Pro Tour, and kudos to him for admitting that he made a mistake. And I hope the best in that situation, and hopefully people can give him an opportunity at least. I'm not saying you have to give the guy a clean slate and never watch him or never think twice about it. I'm not saying forget the past. I'm just saying let's give him a chance to prove that he has changed. I'm okay with that being like the baseline,
Yep. Totally fine with that.
So in the wake of that, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was definitely the fact that immediately after Lil, we got the BNR that we knew was coming. It was scheduled. We knew that they were going to announce stuff to put into, we knew it was coming. Is it interesting to you that people immediately saw it and had to complain that nothing got touched, in spite of the fact that Prism leaving opens everything up? I mean, I know it didn't surprise you, but is it disappointing that people couldn't just be satisfied with saying, hey, let's see what the game actually does before we try to start touching things?
I ignore that almost in its entirety. Like, I wasn't disappointed because I just didn't even, if we're going down that road, like, I'm disappointed with like a lot of the community almost constantly, but from all the bitching. So like, there's that piece of it, right? So I mean, like, I think that the people that were complaining about nothing getting touched, shut up. Like, it, like, literally, if you wanted a more open, like, so what did they want to get hit? Briar, right? What allowed Briar to be what she was? What was missing from the format, or like what was lesser than in the format because of Prism, right?
Yeah.
And now Prism's gone. Guess who is like way more free and clear to run? Blake. I mean,
the Guardians and Icelander definitely got the doors opened wide to them.
What's going to happen? What's going to happen to like Briar players when all those decks hit a resurgence? I wonder.
Yeah.
Like, is that gonna? Do you think it's gonna affect the Briar? Do you think it's gonna affect the Briar matchup at all?
I mean, people seem to not think that, but
I mean, I can count on I need to count on all my digits how many people I know that are like pumped about where Guardian's at.
Yeah.
So
I just don't think that people see a deck, and it's a TCG thing in general. I feel like sometimes it feels distilled down and a little bit stronger in Fab, because heroes are so. When people complain at other games, sometimes they complain about a card. They're more bothered by cards in decks. That's because in a lot of games, there's a wide enough pool of, whether it's something like Dragon Ball where they have a leader, or it's Magic where they have like a deck that's built around a concept, a color. The problem is usually in those things, there's kind of like an identifiable problem. You go, well, this card is bad.
This deck is running this combination, or this deck, this leader in Dragon Ball Super has this card as a tool, and that's making it an issue. With Fab, you have to have like more brain cells to be able to identify that stuff. And I feel like the people that make these immediate complaints are like, well, like, I don't want to actually think about problems. So like, Briar was all 4 of the top 4. Like, I need to bitch. I need to complain, because that's who I am as a person. So what am I going to complain about? I got to complain about Briar, right? I gotta say that, like, well, this is obviously a problem. Look at the top 4. Look at how many were in the top 8. Like, I mean,
that's probably the funniest part is that people's pool of reference, or the thing that they're using to prove their point, is such a small, like, such a minuscule point. They've chosen from a
now completely irrelevant pool of data.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like,
because technically we're not, you can't ban things in a meta that effectively was just banned. And that may be the bigger thing that people have to consider, is that Prism and Luminaris, again, LL is a separate thing. Living Legend is a way to balance and rotate the game. It is a ban list. It's banned from play. That's the result of Living Legend, is things get banned from play. I understand that it's modeled differently and framed differently in Fab, but realistically, what they did
what's happening
after Lil was banned Prism. That's what the game did. The game naturally banned Prism. And I think people aren't thinking about the fact that a hero and an entire card pool along with the weapon got banned after Lil. So there were a lot of cards that got banned because they're unplayable and constructed now. But people don't view it that way. They say, well, nothing got banned on the banned and restricted list. You're like, no, basically all light illusionist cards, as well as Prism and all of her stuff.
But that wasn't the problem. It was Briar. Briar was the problem. Briar needs to get hit, you know.
My big point for people is the whole idea of having to view it as saying, look, a hero got banned.
Right.
Effectively.
Yeah.
So they want to see what happens. That would be like saying, well, we're banning Plunder Run. Well, what else got banned? Well, we're not worrying about other bans right now. We just banned this one card that we think is the problem card. Well, but you have to ban other things because it's like, right. But to your point, Dane, they need a new pool of data to actually understand where the meta game is at, because they can only do so much testing.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that they made it very clear. That's the thing I appreciate about those articles when they talk about those things, is they didn't just go, yay, Prism, woo, it's gone, see ya, and then like let her ride off in the sunset with this big fanfare. They put a very clear note that they will be watching the national season, and if Briar seems to be an issue, they will not hesitate to take action. Like that's right. I'm almost 100% certain that's the actual verbiage they use. They will take action if Briar is a problem. I think they're saying
they've shown in the past too. Like they've that whole thing, that whole complaining about that felt very unnecessary, and just like people who needed that in their lives needed to get that off their chest. And power to them. That's why I don't spend any time on Facebook anymore. So there is that.
The weakest complaint, though. Can we talk about the weakest complaint?
Yeah.
Every time a banned and restricted comes up, somebody goes, Rosetta Thorn needs to be banned. Why is it not? It's like, look, man, we get it. We get that the weapon feels overpowered. We get that it's a bad cost to damage curve and decks that are built to go around it. We all understand that the thing is annoying. We get that most people wish it would have just been elemental. The irony is most people have complained up until this moment that, oh, that card just needs to say elemental. Well, guess who the best Rune Blade is? You'd still see it in every deck because it's Briar. All of the best ones are Briar. Like, the only thing it would have changed in Top Cut is that Pablo's deck would have had to run something else. The Viz deck would have had to something. But other than that, all the other Rune Blades in Top Cut, it belonged to her anyway. It's her weapon.
Right. No, so kind of caveating off of this, there's, AJ from Adventure Co. put out like the lifespans, right? And that was really interesting to me because I didn't realize we had Prism for this long. So he put out basically how long these different heroes were legal for, right? So you've got Prism that was legal for 480 days. Chain was legal for 413 days. Starvo was 140 days. And he's just asking the question, like, is that too fast, too slow? What are your thoughts, right? I didn't realize that, like, dude, that's almost, like, I guess maybe 480 just sounds like a lot, but that's a long time. I was like, fuck, it's Monarch 15, came out. Yeah, Monarch came out how long ago?
Right? Yeah. I mean, Prism was legal for 15 months, which in the grand scheme of things in a TCG, that's a long time. I mean, that's more than the time that a lot of games operate their rotations under. Is more like it's a year max, and that's assuming that the best deck didn't get banned already effectively, right?
And it's also different. It's worth noting that it's different because of the way that like LSS has built their game. Like it's not
100%.
It's not the same as saying like some overpowered red blue deck in Magic like rotated out naturally, like because red blue's always going to exist, right? But like this is a hero that no longer exists in classic constructed in competitive play, right? Outside of this amalgamous living legend format. But like how do you feel about the lifespans of the heroes so far? Like now that we're starting to see like the top heroes start to rotate, what were your thoughts?
So I think one of the things that I was curious about, and he very quickly, somebody made a comment or somebody responded to his tweet and asked about Briar for a reference point. And he quickly did the math, which again, kudos to AJ for doing the work to actually go back and do the math and not just saying, dude, you can look at release dates, you dumb. Briar has currently been legal for, at the time it was like 290. So we'll say 300 days is basically what she's been legal for now. If she makes it through the next BNR, which is after national season, she'll have been legal for about 374 days. So it's over a year. I think if heroes live longer than a year, the best heroes in the game, who all of the ones so far that are on that list, other than Prism, had to have a touch. Chain and Briar both had to have something adjusted to try to bring them back to the field a little bit. Interestingly enough, those decks also lived 2 to 3 months shorter lifespans than Prism, kind of proving the point that if a good and balanced fair deck that doesn't need adjustments at some point is Prism, and decks that need adjustments are Chain and Briar, I think it's fine. I think well over a year. I mean, if you
think a year to a year and a half is probably perfectly healthy as far as like losing like a top deck, because I think that Prism is the first deck that hit Living Legend the way that LSS pictured them hitting Living Legend, right? Like, because like all the other Living Legend heroes had like a hot spot, like they had like a season or they had a win during a time where they were not functioning
really
how
problematic.
LSS, where they're more problematic. But like Prism has been, for the most part, not problematic, right? Just been a really good deck that like really good pilots will take because she does her thing, right? So I think that Prism as sort of the template, like if the best deck or the deck that's been there, just like always kind of grinding for those top spots, is lasting a year and a half. I mean, I feel fine with that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that that's perfectly healthy.
The biggest thing that I think a lot of people are curious about, and this is something that I'm also kind of interested in, is as we get more and more events, because as the game grows, you have to host more events of certain types. Do they need to continue? Because they have so far, and I think they've done a good job of it. Do they have to continue to scale the points back? Or so I think they have to, what they'll have to do to balance it is continue to scale points backwards. They have to go less. So if the current nationals format is 40 for most countries, 80 for US nationals, I think if they view the point system as problematic because it's happening too fast, those have to be scaled back to maybe 30 and 60 or something of that nature, versus pushing the cap for Living Legend higher. Because if you push the cap higher, then you have to ask the question, what happens to the decks that already hit it? Are they just irrevocably gone from the game?
I mean, I think you don't have to adjust that. Right? I think that it can be always stated that this is going forward for the sake of anything keeping it. Yeah. Because I think like in a perfect world, obviously you want to have like this like gold medal accomplishment, right? And then like anyone who hits that gets it. Like that's just how it is, and it's going to be like that. It's going to be so you can compare. But I mean, even using that analogy, like looking back at the people in the Olympics in the fucking 40s, like that's not comparable. So I mean, there's always there's always cause and rationale behind making those adjustments to make it still fit what they want it to do. I will say that, you know, I think last week or the week before, I was talking about how, you know, I don't think that Living Legend points actually capture what decks are doing really well. Because like say for whatever reason that Vis had won, you know, like that doesn't capture the fact that Briar made up so much of the fucking top 8. So but that's not what Living Legend is supposed to be. It's like a pseudo, like it adds to like their ban and restricted, it adds to their ability to sort of shape this larger metagame. But like it is supposed to just be like this accomplishment that a hero gets. So yeah, I think it should just be the winner. I think they should balance the points to make sure it's not happening too fast. Because I would also be curious to see like the breakdown of where the points came from for each of these heroes. Like how many of these points for Prism came from like calling winds or, you know, like, and how many came from Road to Nationals? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I think that would be really interesting, because I think that like, a lot of Chain's points came from 2 Road to National seasons where he
was a
like,
menace.
Well, where he was just a menace, and then like he won what? Like how many? I mean, he won.
So he won
that's
the first.
Sorry, I don't. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I would just like to see like the breakdown of where the points actually came from, because that would be really interesting to see.
I agree. Yeah, that would definitely be something of interest to me, because it would put into context maybe even where these decks found their strongest points, because you do wonder sometimes you wonder sometimes where they got their points based solely on how hard it is to pilot these decks over a long, like the long road, because sometimes certain decks definitely, you know, when Chain was Siege Chain or Briar was Plunder Briar, they were definitely, and I don't think anyone would argue that they were oftentimes the pick of people who had to play in longer tournaments, because they didn't present a mental fatigue that a deck like Prism does. Prism does require a much tighter pilot. You are much more punished for a mistake, whereas with Chain and Briar, especially with the Plunder version, there were times where the deck just sometimes was so busted and degenerate that it would win games for you. Starvo had that effect too, where there were times with Starvo where people can argue all they want. Well, the mirror, well, the this, well, the that. Right. But then sometimes you would be irreversibly pushed out of a game by a lesser player because Starvo went reveal Okanold, reveal Okanold. It's like, cool. So you just happened upon the 3 best cards in your deck, and you don't have to do anything for the rest of the game because I'm losing this game. I cannot win this game from this point. And Prism exists in a world where she almost never has that against the best decks, or she's never had that in a situation where when she's playing at top tables, the decks that she's playing, while she can have a positive matchup into some of them, because even the Guardian matchup, it's entirely possible for Prism at times when she was playing the Guardians to make a mistake and have a Guardian absolutely punish her for it.
Right.
And then get ahead, and all of a sudden Prism's down by 20 life, and it's like, uh-oh, I drew 2 no block cards. I think I'm going to lose. And that can happen. That pretty much never happened to Siege Chain, Full Reveal Starvo, or Plunder Briar. Like, there was never a time. Like, it was obnoxious with Plunder Briar where you would rip 2 cards from their hand, and they would go Plunder from Arsenal, Plunder from hand, Snatch for 7 with Go Again. If it hits, I draw 3 cards. And you're just like, yeah, I mean, I have to 2 card and a piece of equipment block this, or I just get blown out. And I left you with 2 cards. Like, I left you with 2 cards. You never left Prism with 2 cards and went, okay, I could get blown out of this game. It's like, I mean, okay, best case scenario for her, she's got a ton of soul and just a million spectrals and a bunch of auras, and she can make a spectral and swing out. That's like the best case scenario she can have with 2 cards. But if she doesn't have a board built up, she never won anyway. And I don't know. I think that's part of her lifespan too. Is she presented a much harder puzzle to solve in long tournaments than some of these other decks did at times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that like I said, I think that's a healthy life cycle. I think Prism represents a pretty healthy life cycle for a hero. So I would hope that going forward they continue to show us balanced metas where that's going to be feasible. I would love to see less Starvo type Living Legends.
Yeah, the game does not need that. That's an unhealthy thing in every sense.
Yeah,
that's probably the biggest thing. Is Starvo is unhealthy for everything. Decks like Prism and Chain and Briar will make you feel bad sometimes because they get ahead of you, or they do a thing that seems really insane. But never in the way that Starvo did. There's just never a time that they're like, because every deck has that. Like, if you play, you see people do this stupid thing where they're like, I had a 40 damage turn with Fi, and you see that somebody didn't block something at one point. You're just like, why are you blocking with all of your cards and then letting him hit you with Phoenix Form and draw 3 cards? Are you just that bad at the game?
Right.
And it's stuff like that you just, I don't know. It blows my mind sometimes when people complain about some decks and you're just like, just block it right.
God, just
think
this through. Know what they're actually gonna know what actually hurts you in the matchup. I just lost my train of thought. No. There was something that I wanted to talk about, and we talked about it before the podcast, and I said I was going to bring it up when we were talking Living Legend.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have talked about, and this has been something that we talked about actually in the group chat, was this idea of beyond a hero's lifespan,
right?
The afterlife, not for the deck or the players, because there are people who are devout players of a hero, and you do wonder, because this game is so hero centric, right? Flake actually tweeted this week, when you think of a certain hero, who is the first person that comes to your mind? And I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of people that are very much identified by their hero. Now, there are some like Matt Rogers who you would say, well, Matt was the OG Dash guy, but he very much plays the best hero that he can play, that he thinks presents him the opportunity to win. Then there are other people like Kale McCree that you go, Kale plays Bravo.
Right.
Kale is identified by Bravo, and Bravo is identified by Kale. Like they have a symbiotic relationship. And you wonder in those instances, right? What we were talking about was what you do after the fact. What is LSS's, and I'm curious what other people think, because this was our big kind of sticking point.
We had a back and forth today, just even like earlier today, talking about, because like I loved the play style of Light Illusionist. Prism's gone, Luminaris is gone. That's fine. But now I'm looking at like what decks I want to play and run, and I'm kind of going off the wall a little bit. Like I think I'm just gonna like buckle down on Icelander, honestly. But like that's not necessarily what I loved about Light Illusionist, right? So what is LSS's plan? What would you guys like to see? Because I know I would just like to be informed. I don't even really care, but I want to know what's like. I put some money, just like a little bit, into my Prism deck because I really liked it. I knew I was going to play that deck for as long as it was going to be viable. And legal, I should say. Like even not viable, I'd still play it. But like I now have no outlet for that at all. So I would just like to know, like it's not even like it needs to be in the next 6 months or I'm going to be so pissed. Like, I don't care. I just like, let me know. I would love in like the next month or two for them to put out like, this is our general plan. Even if it's just like Q2 of 2023, when we release the history packs for Monarch and Aria and all that stuff. Cause like they're doing that one more time, right? With the next 6 history packs. Like, I think they're just doing it for these, and then going forward, they've got for the first 2 like sets, chunks, and we're releasing tokens of a new hero to replace all the Living Legend heroes. Like, cool, done, satisfied. Like, but I'm curious what other people would want to see with that, because that's enough for me, might not be enough for other people, and they might want something sooner. They might want something more solidified. I don't know. They might want a PDF of replacement hero released that's in testing for them to dick around with. I have no idea, but curious what your guys' thoughts are.
One of the things that I found interesting about the discussion today is when we were talking about it, one of the points was, oh God, another illusionist. Now we get it. Now we're going to end up finding out how, or if we live without illusionists, we'll see how truly busted Spectra is. And immediately the rest of us in the group went, Luminaris isn't legal, so that kind of makes pretty huge difference in terms of like what's viable and what's reasonable to believe that somebody could actually do with the deck. Because at the end of the day, that's the thing I think most people had a problem with. And there are some times where I wonder if deep down LSS was trying to figure out how to, okay, well, when Prism dies or when whatever goes, do we ban their weapons? Do we ban? And I wonder if the pairing of the weapon wasn't almost 100%
Prism Luminaris,
Prism and Rosetta.
I could see
we're Prism and Briar because they thought, man, Luminaris and Rosetta are going to be the cards that give us issues because anything that starts in play that has a static effect over the game that's this strong has to go at some point.
Well, it hinders simply design space. Like think of if Luminaris was going to exist with whatever they come out with next for Light Illusionist. Think about how limited what they could do with that hero could actually be. You know what I mean? Like that's so. Like I'm really happy that Luminaris is gone because I want to see something. I mean, and I trust LSS because they've shown me that I can trust them and not be fearful, and I can still sleep at night. Like, I think that they could come up with something really cool, some mechanic, some different weapon that does something else to the auras that makes it play different, makes it still viable, and not like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, but if Luminaris is still a weapon, then that's, nope, it's got to be Prism 2.0 with probably a different hero power that is just slightly worse, if not similar. You know what I mean? Like, I'm more excited because Luminaris is going to be gone because it's less known. I have no idea what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, it makes for a much more interesting game in terms of the interaction between players. That's the big thing is I went and met Jason and Nick and some other guys. We did some testing, right? And that's the big thing testing into Dromai is Spectra not being as big, number one, is obviously a big deal. But more importantly, the fact that there is a lot more interaction between two players with dragons out versus the auras out. And not just because of Spectra, but because of the way the auras all interacted with one another. There was a lot of issues with that. But also because Dromai has to have certain things work. And if you just play Channel Lake Frigid, sometimes it goes, hey, just so you know, you don't get to play next turn. You're not going to be playing this turn, just so you know. And also there's a risk and reward situation for Dromai where she plays a dragon that has an effect if it swings and hits, or because it's out, it has an effect that's really good, so she has to play it. But then she kind of offers up this sacrificial lamb. You know, it's like, here's a little meat sack. If you want to jab it, you can go ahead and you can get whatever hit effect you want. This is it right here. And I look at Dromai and I think maybe she's not the perfect version of Prism. In a lot of ways, people kind of seem to go to the Dromai is what they always envisioned Prism to be. I'm not 100% sure that's true.
But
I think she went to another area, but there are things that they could learn from both of those heroes to give us a light illusionist that feels like everybody has an opportunity to play the game. Because that's the thing that more than anything people had a problem with Prism is there are times where she does things and she can just tell you don't get to play the game. And she doesn't have to do the same type of things. And some of it is the way that the design and the rule book and things allow for that interaction where she made really negative experiences out of some of the simplest things. Full shackles or seismic or like tokens popping at the start of a turn and her just going, Arclight Sentinel. Like, oh god. Like if we could just never have that interaction again in a way where then the next turn that she gets to use that to like protect a full board of weapons, that would be great. I would like that personally.
Well, I mean, Arclight's gone too, unless unless like the hero that they come out with is going to be like
named Prism
something different, right? Like kind of like what they did with Dorinthia. But I think it'd be cool to see like a different light illusionist. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of that they're offered. They have an opportunity. One of the things that's been cool about Dynasty coming up is that as they've started to slowly release some of the things, even in Uprising, they pointed out that they added lore writers to the team or the staff, or they've got access to more lore writers, and you could tell that in Uprising. It was really good. It was well written, well composed. I think they have an opportunity with bringing in a new light illusionist that they could tie the story to Prism, right? You could easily have it be some sort of, oh, this is Prism's protege. You know, they were taught the ways of the light from Prism, and you can add some of those cool dynamic with the lore and story and stuff. So
for sure. Or even like, I mean, I thought too, like, how cool would it be if one of Hero Living Legends, they become a mentor. Yeah. You know, and like you can run that mentor in Blitz, and like you kind of get like a pseudo hero effect or something like that. But like keeping them in the game in that way would be really interesting. But like in the lore right now, there's no one I can think of that would be like, they would obviously have to like add it in or write it in. But yeah, like it's so wide open for what they can do with how they handle this. I think I'm not even like demanding some sort of answer. I'm just excited for what it's going to be. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I think it's coming more from like excitement and anticipation than it is from like, I'm really upset she's gone and I need to know like what is going to happen. Like that's not where it's coming from. It's coming from like, I'm so curious what their plan is going to be. So,
right.
Yeah. And I did just check, and the Dynasty article is still not up.
I know. I've got it over here and I keep refreshing it. And
like, are they going off Pacific time? Like what's the first, the 1st of September, it's almost not even the 1st of September Central Time anymore now.
I don't know. So I'm not 100% sure. They're just tired.
For sure not the 1st of September there. So
you're going to wait. They're going to update it. It's going to say like the 9th of September here in a minute.
They have done that before too. Yeah, they've totally done that.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah. Whatever. It's I'm just ready for an article.
I know.
More information.
I want to know more about Dynasty.
Be more.
For not having Jason here to like really get the fire rolling, we knocked out a solid 50 minutes. I'm cool calling it. You got anything else you want to talk about? I mean, I touched on what I wanted to touch on. I don't.
Yeah, no, that's kind of my thing. I'm interested. I'm very interested to see what other people think about Hero Lifespan. Very interested to see what people think about Living Legend in general. Would they play it? How would they model it? Those kind of things, because that's even a discussion point. And then what do you do when the heroes are gone? Who's next? Next man up, next woman up. Who is it? Where do they come from? How quickly do we need them? Those are. I'm very interested in what other people think of that.
I'm surprised you didn't get more into how like you emphasized a lot in our conversation today how you wanted them to take their time and like make sure that they weren't like you didn't want them to feel the need to quickly replace these Living Legend heroes. And I think Prism's the most blatant gap now, because like even when we've lost other heroes like Starvo. Okay, Starvo hit Living Legend. All the cards are still playable to some degree in something, right? Like it was kind of a weird situation, but like Prism's the first big blatant gap. I made a meme, I'll tweet it, but it was like the Mike Wazowski disappointed face where it's just like LSS realizing that they still had 2 years of planned promo support for Prism Light Illusionist cards. But no, like I think that's a good point too, is like I don't maybe that's part of why I'm feeling more patient with it, is like I also don't want them to just be like, oh god, it's gone, like next couple months, or with Dynasty we got to release tokens or of like a new hero. It's like, not, I don't need that. I just need to know like what the plan is vaguely and I'll be satisfied. But
that's my big thing. And it's not even from a place of I don't want to see those heroes come back into the game, or I don't want to see those classes exist. It's more just I I have so enjoyed after the nightmare that was the Starvo meta and a complete and utter lack of desire to play at times because it was so miserable and such an unfun experience to even go to Armory at times where people would just feel the need to unga bunga with Starvo and not enjoy the game. I have thoroughly enjoyed this new world post Starvo where it feels like the game is open, feels like people are playing the decks that they want to play because so much is viable, and just don't want that disrupted. I just don't want it. We have a delicate ecosystem right now, and I don't want them to disrupt the ecosystem with an apex predator.
Yeah, that's funny because that was my analogy today. I was like, what I love about the design of this game is I feel like it's not like a balanced ecosystem in every set, and like it opens the door to like introducing a big predator. It's like I feel like in this game, how it's built, you have a pretty wide array of different predators already existing within the ecosystem. So like, and the more that you have there, and the more card depth that you have, like you were bringing up the point of, like parapet,
Sigil parapet.
Sigil. And then rewind, like stuff that's like not really played. It's just additional depth right now. It's like the more they do that and build that depth, the more likely it is that a solution to a apex predator being released already kind of exists somewhere. I'm not saying it does, or that's always going to be the case, but I'm saying the way that they're releasing the game, the way that they're releasing cards, like not every card released directly feeds into a clear archetype. And that's cool because that means that they're just throwing seeds, right? They're just spreading seeds out, and when a predator comes along, that the rewind really hurts them or something, like who knows? Who knows? But yeah, all right, cool. Well, I mean, that's all I got.
That's it for me too.
Cool, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe. We are still towing right around the low 80, 1580. So once we hit that 1600, doing another giveaway of the now irrelevant Heralds of Rebirth. But pick them up now. Don't be like all of the people out there that are dumb and are selling. It's like they just missed like the basic economics class where they're like, wait, was I supposed to buy low or sell low? I think you sell low, buy high. Is that what happens? Now that prices have plummeted, let's all sell. And then when the new hero gets released and they're like, oh, I want that, buy it when the prices go back up. That's how it works, right? So hold that stuff, dude. Hold it. That's all I got. Thanks for joining us. Talk to y'all next week. Peace.